Welcome to the Journey of an Aesthete podcast, a comprehensive examination of all things aesthetic, the arts, the humanities, and what it means to be human.
Something to play for you now.
Oh?
To introduce this show, I got a little piece of music for you.
Okay.
And see what you, and I'm gonna play it, and then we'll take a break, and well, not a break, but we'll. All right, so bear with me.
Okay.
How's that?
Beautiful.
Do you know what that is?
What is it?
That's something I wrote in 2014, May to be exact.
You know what? I didn't want to assume because I have the score here, actually right next to me. My office.
What do you think about that I just played that?
It's beautiful. You know what? I don't know, Mitch. I don't think I ever actually heard it. I just saw the score.
Okay.
So that was amazing.
Yeah.
Because Yeah, it's interesting that you wrote that while I was in labor, didn't you?
Yes.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it has this feeling of waves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Which is what I was thinking about while I was listening to it, which is, contractions and it's very fitting, very beautiful. Yeah. That's one of the most I don't know if I ever fully conveyed. It's one of the most important gifts anyone has given to me. I have it framed, and I'm planning on, when she's old enough to really understand and appreciate, I'm planning on giving it to her.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
that was kind of the idea, but I don't. I'm really, thank you. I'm very honored by that. I just feel like so much time has passed since then, right? I mean, it's now
I know.
2019.
Yeah.
And let's see, 2014. One of the first things I wanted to talk about, I've been doing these shows. I'm totally new to podcasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I really believe in my mission, so to speak, which is to try to have a maximum amount of stylistic diversity. Okay.
Mm.
So, maximum amount of stylistic diversity in terms of not just mediums, but also, where people fit in the aesthetic or artistic landscape. So I will have someone like you on my show, gladly, happily. Mm-hmm. But I might also have someone that used to produce network television. I might have a comedian. I might have a poet. I mean, what I mean is that it's, I'd love to have your mom on the show. It's would be I didn't want to, well, I don't know, because it's hard, it's hard to wrangle and get everybody together, but you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of the theme of it, is the unity of all the arts. I mean, we don't necessarily have to talk about that specifically, but it may or may not come up in the course of the discussion.
Okay.
So what do you think about that? Or what's your...
I think that's excellent. I think that's wonderful. I mean, you've known me for some time. You've known my work for some time, and I've always had kind of 1 foot in audio, 1 foot in visual sort of thing. Yeah. So for me, I think it makes for a great conversation and show, because we do get, we're not actually as isolated as it might feel sometimes in a certain discipline or a genre. We're getting influenced by others, we're getting inspired by others, we're, maybe having a intense day in the studio and wanting to come home and watch some network TV to take our mind off. We're not in a bubble, really. So I think it's great that you're doing a show to kind of make that into, rather than separate words into one sentence. I think it's a great idea.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you. I knew you would. I knew you would love that, actually.
It's so nice to hear your voice again, Mitch.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
It's been a while, yeah.
So what would you say? Would you say when was it? So I wanted to start off the show talking about Saul Levine's. Was that how we met? Saul Levine at Mass Art Film Society, right?
Actually, you and I, sort of, indirectly, I think before that we met, I was with Rebecca Barron.
Yes.
We were, Rebecca and I had done sound for her How Little We Know of Our Neighbors.
Oh, bringing back these memories. That's such a wonderful film. Have you talked to Rebecca? We're talking about Rebecca Barron, who's a filmmaker. So that's right. You did this audio for that.
Yeah. And so she was screening in Boston, and I had not been back in a while.
Yeah.
Since graduating. So I came, and then, Saul actually, let's see. I think Rebecca screened at, Rebecca screened at Massart, but I did a screening of my film there also. But I think it was actually in between there, in that week or 2 weeks.
Yep.
Rebecca had a screening at, was it the Brattle?
I'm going to want to say Harvard Film Archive. But
it was probably Harvard Film Archives.
Right.
And that's where you and I started talking.
Yes.
Because I think I was talking a bit about that documentary that I had started, that I had actually recorded you for, which is one of my favorite recordings. But if
you have to refresh my memory, what is this? What project are you talking about now? I'm sorry.
So it's The Plane Flies High Because I'm Not Afraid.
Because I'm not afraid. That's right.
Finished it. Yeah. I couldn't. I got to that point where I was like, I kept asking myself, are these my stories to share? Is this my story to tell? And ultimately I decided it wasn't. But
whoa, slow down there. So I'm actually want you to continue doing that project. Maybe
I will, Mitch. Or do you know what? I think even more importantly, I need to send you the footage of you playing piano.
You should. I would love to see it.
Really,
and also,
I love that footage.
I'm not really a respecter of those kind of boundaries that much, really, as you know. I don't think in terms, right? But also, we're talking about my own. Do you want to talk about my own psychological profile? Because that fits into that. It sort of fits in, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's again. These aren't my stories to tell.
Right.
So that's up to you. But we could if you want. But I do that. Because I think it's interesting how we met each other in that we had these big differences that I think we were kind of interested in the differences in each other, and then ultimately kind of realized that maybe actually emotionally connected with creativity, there was actually a lot more similarity there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, how often do you stop projects or start? What comes to mind when I think about first meeting you was Sophie Calle, right?
Oh gosh, yeah.
How do you feel about that now?
I'm glad I did it. Actually, The Plane Flies High Because I'm Not Afraid is the only project I've never finished.
Mm-hmm.
That I started like on my own. There's some collaborations that sometimes don't peter out. That's normal, but I'm almost to a fault obsessive about completion. But I didn't finish that film.
Okay.
Or but maybe it's still in just a very long pause, or maybe I'm trying to gather and learn the right tools and have the right experiences to be able to finish it. But the Sophie Calle, that was my thesis.
That's
and
right.
That finished. Yeah. And I'm glad I did it. And I'm kind of secretly glad that it didn't have too much of an afterlife at this point.
Why is that?
Well, because I was young, and it was, young and naive, and it was a little embarrassing, which I'm glad I pushed myself to do. And also there were some ethical boundaries I crossed that, again, I'm glad I explored, but ultimately I wasn't comfortable with, which actually is what the film is about.
Yeah, that's the theme of the film, or subject matter of the film. And do you feel that connects to the what was it, autism or I don't know what the
it was
the plane flies high because I'm not afraid. The idea, that
was
the backwards, the idea that because I have this feeling about this plane.
There was an autistic boy who said to his father, pointing up at the sky of the plane flies high because I'm not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially saying, I'm not afraid of flying, I'm not afraid of planes. The plane can fly high. And I was interested in how that was actually could be a truth, and, you know, interested in how, you know, how subjective and fluid truth or diagnosis if all of that can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's truth and falsehood, right? So I think if you're a hard-nosed scientist, right? If you're you know what I mean? Like a strict scientific materialist, you would call that magical thinking, or you would call that delusional.
Right. Actually, it's interesting, Mitch, because this does. I'm only just sort of realizing that this is. Wow, this is interesting.
No, but there's other ways of being in the world.
Realize, because I haven't talked about or thought about that film in a long time, or even, you know, stalking Sophie, and I'm thinking about what I'm doing now, and actually, an ongoing theme is a call for an acceptance of complication.
Yep.
And like a call for an acceptance of the importance of being able to accept that we don't understand everything, and to, while it might be easier to talk about or create a formula or make a diagnosis about, you know, when you're looking at one selective part, that actually we're ready to evolve to have at least an acceptance of the sense of a hyperobject, of a big thing that we can't fully see, but we can maybe sense.
Yeah.
Or even just accept that we don't, you know, the way I think is not the way someone else thinks, and neither is true or false, or, you know, it just, it still terrifies us to think like that. And
terrifies who exactly? Who's the us? I mean,
I think humans in general get very scared of that. I'm like generalizing the entire globe, but but I think we do in many different ways. And I mean, I guess it's philosophy, right? But
I mean, I can tell you, I would be really, really afraid to leave this country, as awful as this country actually is, even now, and move to another country. Because for me, the change would be so stressful. Even if that change is would be the best thing, hypothetically, in the world. I'm somebody that likes to do the same thing every day. I like ritual. I'm not for being uprooted. And yet, there are some people that, you know, they marry somebody who's Portuguese, or they do this, or they do that, and they get up and they pack their bags, and it's interesting. So I think different people are afraid of different things, or they think everybody's different in terms of what they want to take on. I think people even differ in what they consider a change or not. It's very I've always been keenly aware of this. So I have great admiration for someone like yourself, actually, who packs up and moves to another country and lives there. I think that's actually quite extraordinary.
I really appreciate that. I was really scared. And I think I also was, I think I just closed my eyes and jumped.
Oh, yeah, you did that. Okay.
I think it was just kind of like, it was impulsive. It was like, I just have to do this, because if I don't do it, I'll never do it. I don't know why I felt like I was starting to feel a bit stuck. I was working in an ad agency, and I think it's scarier now, the thought of, like, if I'm going to were to move again. Of course, now I have, you know, a child, and I have a chronic ill dog that needs a lot of care, and
I'm sorry.
Things have changed, but.
Well, you talk about the ethics of your own film, but of course, Sophie Calle was she an object of inquiry in that regard? Was she somebody who was questioned on those grounds as an artist?
Yeah, she was, and I actually, this is part of why I feel I only really feel okay about that film because I was young, but I don't. I don't feel. I feel like my own questioning. I didn't do the film well in the sense that my own questioning of myself and what I was doing, and that I was essentially like remaking what project she had done.
That's right. That's right.
Then I was essentially throwing her into that spotlight too, and questioning and critiquing. While I was questioning and critiquing myself, I was questioning and critiquing her, and it wasn't. I wasn't in a place to do that right or effectively. And I think what was effective about the film was my own sort of, it's not a flattering film towards me, which was, I was cognizant of that definitely, but
does that mean you see that film as connected to, say, someone like Kaveh Sahidi, or, and I'm just picking names out of a hat, of filmmakers who actually are very unreliable narrators, or maybe narrators that aren't so positive? Is that so? Do you see yourself as consciously in that film in that line, or no, or I don't know? I mean, because do you know what I'm saying? Because part of it's sort of like an essay film, right?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, I sort of go in bold, and then there's a lot of self-deprecation.
Yeah. I mean, you see that in the work of, oh God, you know this filmmaker. She is also associated with Harvard. Who she was making a film with an Iranian, I think. Operation filmmaker Davenport. Does this ring? You know what I mean?
The name is familiar.
Yeah. Is it Nina Davenport?
Nina Davenport. Yeah. But that's the thing, is because, who was I? I was this little, graduate student who loved her work. And it wasn't, and that's the thing, what doesn't really work about the film is because the essay of the film didn't really correctly, that conclusive point about myself wasn't supposed to be putting her in a negative light, but it kind of did indirectly. And I talked to her I apologized to her for that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Her and I had a really nice
Oh,
talk.
this is what I wanted to talk about. See, I should have. We're getting there in the long way around, because I'm just sort of introducing the audience to. Some people might not know who Sophie Calle is, actually, right? I mean, so I don't know. But you actually communicated with her. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, no, well, and that's a good point. You should never assume, who's listening. So that's a really good point. So she was this well-known, photographer, other mediums as well. Yeah. But she would do works that would bump up against the threshold of privacy, of intimacy, of identity, a lot with identity, and she would play with these things. So she had a project she was working as what are they called? Chambermaids.
That's right. And she was going in the
rooms. And she would go through and photograph. She would go through people's luggage and photograph things, and made these kind of stories about the people, and they're all very. I mean, she's never. It's not, none of it is mean spirited. It's it's kind of playful. She's self-deprecating to herself as well, and
that's right. That's part of her strategy. That's part of her sensibility. Yeah,
but definitely there's a question of because it was a long time ago where I thought about her work like this.
I'm sorry to do this to you, Maile. Again, I'm trying to.
No,
there's a method to.
It's great, Mitch.
There's a method to my madness. I mean, if a person does something, I think you have to look at all of what a person does. Kind of, you don't want to stay there forever. You don't want to. I mean, we're trying to do this in a linear fashion, so we have to figure out how you get that from to come kingdom come, or Yeah, you want to I guess get all the things. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. No, and I think I think that's a great. It's funny because I have this really wonderful Mexican filmmaker staying with me right now, Valentina Pellejo.
Really?
And and her and I were actually just, because she also went to CalArts.
She did.
Yeah.
Did she go to college? Did she take James Benning's class like you did?
Yeah.
Do you mind discussing with the listeners the importance of that class and what he was doing? Because that's a whole. Because we have to talk about CalArts, right? Do you want to go talk about that now, or do you want
to? Which class? Which class?
The James Benning. I think it was James Benning. Look and Listen. He had
looking and listening. I actually, Benning was my mentor, but I actually only sat or stood or walked and looked and listened in on that class a few times.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those classes. Well, I don't. Yeah, it definitely. I think it has an individual importance for the people that take it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really think it's something that artists should be doing anyway. But I guess that was kind of the point, and why it is important is a lot of young artists don't necessarily know that or aren't necessarily doing that. Sorry?
He designed a whole class on that.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible.
His class was like, for example, one assignment was like, take public transport in Valencia for 4 hours, and then class is over. But you have at CalArts, you have like a lot of students with a lot of privilege, right? And so actually, I don't think it's that far-fetched to say you probably have a lot of students who haven't taken public transport before. So it's trying to gently push people outside of their usual paths, their usual comfort zones, but also trying them to not have just the act of doing that be the important thing, but the act of putting yourself in a position to stay put and experience for a while. And I think that's what James is, in general, that's what his films, try to do, is to get you to stay put and experience for a while. So in that regard, it was a pretty great class.
So tell me about the journey. Well, from CalArts to your first films, and then sound or audio. Do you want to talk about? I mean, what do you want to talk about first, or what comes to mind in terms of your practice, artistic practice and project?
Well, so that relationship with like sound and moving image, that has been, those two grew together. Actually, I've never really been able to fully separate them. So when I went to mass art for undergrad in mid-90s, mid to late 90s, when was it? Wait, no, I guess, yeah. When mid-90s were turning late 90s. That's when I had classes with, like, Slide Clements, who now is in Brazil, was the sound studio teacher there, and I had Mark Laporte, of course, was amazing.
Do you want to talk about Mark Laporte and what he meant to you? If you mentioned him there.
Sure, I'll try to. I still have I never know when I'm going to start crying when I talk about him, but that's okay. As my daughter, I cry a lot.
Just a great filmmaker, and the world may not know Mark Laporte.
Yeah, that's true. So, actually, Valentina wasn't familiar with Mark Laporte. Oh gosh, this is funny. Yeah, things just come around. So I was talking last night. Valentina just arrived. I was talking about Stalking Sophie, the film. So I hadn't talked about or thought about that film in a very long time, and suddenly her and I are talking about it, and suddenly you and I are talking about it. So
sorry.
I was kind of primed.
Yeah.
But we were also talking about Mark Laporte. Mark was an amazing filmmaker and an amazing teacher. He was the kind of teacher that it sounds really cliche, but it was really true. Like, he really made you felt seen and heard with him. You felt like your work was seen and heard. You felt like your, early attempts at trying to articulate your concepts and ideas were seen and heard. It was more than just being encouraged. You felt bolstered. You felt like, he would do these incredible, like, he would show a lot of films, and we would watch, we'd work on our own films, and we'd watch them, and we'd have critiques, and we'd be sitting in, one of the little theater rooms in the Mass Art Film Department, and he would, see or hear something he'd like, and you'd just hear this, like, out of the darkness, and it was just, and you were just like, yes, Mark approves, Mark likes that. Like, it was like he couldn't help himself. He would just, like, audibly always express when he liked something. He loved film.
What films did he show you? What were, just if you think off the top of your head?
Oh, wow, that was a long time ago, but let's see. I think I saw Bruce Conner for the first time.
Yes. Oh, God. These are all my favorite people.
Of course.
Stan Brakhage. But did you see Bruce Conner's a movie?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Bruce Conner's a movie is on my own personal list of one of the greatest movies ever made.
It's an incredible. I show that to all my students as well.
Yeah.
That's the first movies I show my students, actually. Yeah. It really is. It's a super important film. Yeah. And Stan Brakhage, of course. And then one of his good friends, Phil Solomon. I remember seeing Snowman, who also passed away recently.
Oh, that's
right. Saul's films, of course. Who else did I see? That seems like a lot of guys. There was definitely, it makes it sound like he was only showing guys, but he was very, he showed a lot of women too.
Did he show Chick Strand?
Chick Strand, yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. Yes. Chick Strand.
Hey, Maile, do you mind talking to the listeners about Chick Strand and what, I think Chick Strand is just fantastic filmmaker.
Yeah.
How would you describe the movie soft fiction to somebody? What would a contemporary audience think? What would millennials think of soft fiction? Do you show that, or do you? I mean, I don't know what. Just it's an open talk about that. Chick Strand and
what would I haven't actually shown that in class. I should.
Yeah.
I have found the millennial generation, the next generation, to be very open when it comes to media experimentation, and maybe even it seems very sloppy to connect that with, the non-linear way. These tools that we use now in day-to-day life, are like extensions of our brains and memory and communication, they work with so many of those so quickly, so often, and in conjunction with the day-to-day, what we call real life. So I actually have found them like extremely open to experimental work, and I think Chick's work has that kind of like a pulsating energy that actually really kind of matches that I haven't seen her work in a really long time. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've seen her work since CalArts, actually. Because Betsy was good friends with her and would show her. Betsy Bromberg.
Yep.
Another amazing experimental filmmaker, still working. Great. Actually, what's amazing about Betsy to me is that she makes these feature-length, truly experimental films, right? Like right now.
And she makes them feature-length.
Yeah.
I want to draw a link to her on this so people know who people.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's important to do that. I want to spread the word about this stuff.
And actually Betsy, I want to spread the word about Betsy too, because I feel very passionate about her films, especially because I think right now, well, we have an abundance of really great work coming out, absolutely, and really great experimental documentary work and essay documentary work, and what people are calling now hybrid form documentary work. And documentaries work is great and it's important, but everything is documentary right now, and I feel like it's sort of pushed out a place for experimental film that's not experimental documentary. And so I feel like work like Betsy's, that's this ambitious and successful, truly experimental, feature-length, just these epic, gorgeous, sensorial, I do hope there will be another turn. We had the documentary turn, and this was important and good, but I do hope there will be another turn for there to be a place for, experimental work that isn't necessarily hybrid. It's experimental, if that makes any sense.
I'm following you. So you're saying that you feel that this thing has been pushed out, right? Is that you're calling, what would you call that? You would say, would you say it's documentary that's not narrative or not?
No. I think that's what. I feel like experimental work once upon a time we would classify as experimental has been pushed out. It doesn't really have a place right now.
That's
or it's hard for it to find a place.
And the reason for that is because people all want the same kind of film. Is that it, or wouldn't know what the reason for that would be. But
I think that documentary is what's going on right now. So all of the festivals, the programmers, everyone wants documentary. Mm-hmm. So sure, you can have experimental work, but it needs to have some, essence of documentary to it, whether it's in the narrative or whether it's, in the picture. It's got to have some essence of documentary to it.
Yep.
And I love the marriage of experimental and documentary. I think it's, fantastic. I think the experimental forms and methods actually are what pulled documentary into the place it's in now. But unfortunately, pure experimental work got kind of stepped on its way up.
That makes me sad to hear that. I see my brain works in a very strange way, and I don't really, as you know, I'm kind of drawn to something on a very immediate level.
Yeah.
I like something or I don't like something, and it has absolutely nothing to do with a lot of these categories. And I've always struggled to understand these categories,
Yeah.
And because for me, I respond to something immediately. So like a Chick Strand movie, it's just fantastic. It's just such exciting as filmmaking. But yes. I don't really think of myself, what genre or what category. I'm not so. I guess I have trouble wrapping my head around that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, do you think that for example, if there was a festival happening and there was a program of experimental shorts, or a program of feature documentary, which do you think you would choose to go to?
And I have to pick one?
Yeah. I don't know why, but you do.
I think I might pick the shorts for some reason.
Yeah. So
isn't that interesting? Even though I'm and I say that because I think that Fred Wiseman's like one of the greatest filmmakers ever.
Yeah.
But that's a Wiseman film. That's a one-off. It's sort of like a Wiseman film might be 3 hours, right? So that's kind of, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's about the choice. If I have a choice, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's about like getting. It's about the length in that case, right?
I think so.
It was a very good analogy on my part.
It might be a good analogy. It might be. So, off the top, as you know, I've always liked experimental things.
Yeah.
And I've always liked going to experimental things. And I really can't tell you exactly why. I could come up with conjecture. I could say, well, I'm just weird that way. Or I could say that I think it has intrinsic value, so, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah,
so,
absolutely.
But it's actually both.
Yeah.
It's all of that.
Yeah.
It's all of
that.
I
agree. That my thesis, what I'm working on, has a lot to do with the information, the pleasure, the experience, the affects that we get from things outside of necessarily a narrative or a text or a usual format. And actually, a lot of it is calling for artists to get into forms that have been created. For example, like I talk a lot about archives and how, we have we create, our stories of history, or, as philosophers have said, the victors. So those who win get to decide what artifacts from the past to keep, what story that's going to tell. And so one of the things that artists can do is that they can go in and they can rearrange time and rearrange history, and they can make people feel. So they can make a past or a warning for the future. They can make people sense and feel something beyond language, something beyond the usual language of cinema. And when people say cinema has a language, well, no, cinema has a lot of different languages. And what experimental artists can do is really go beyond that language, because they tend to really intuitively work with the other senses and experiment with the other senses and experiment more with time and more with sound, for example, and other sensations. And so if I'm not being clear on anything, just let me know, Mitch.
You're clear.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You're clear. So if we take an individual work like Come Kingdom Come, what is your because I know your process, because I wanted to ask you a lot about sound, obviously, or ideas that you have about sound itself, and working with sound as its own object. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's something, that I actually don't know a lot about, even though I'm a musician, because I work in very, shall we say, traditional forms, and all that. But if I'm Maile Colbert, or if I'm somebody that is thinking about sound in this very exacting way as its own work. Talk about, I mean, that's a big question, of course, but, if you take Come Kingdom Come, how does that, what do you do when you do that? How do you is it, a technical level, or on a level of creation, or how it connects with the text or the theme? So there's a lot, it's an open field. Just talk what comes to your mind, or what's, you know?
Okay. Actually, that's a great, to kind of talk about that journey.
Yeah.
that particular project is a great example for me to talk about, because it spanned, in some ways you might say it's even still going. It spans a bit over a decade.
Wow.
So, and had many different kind of forms and wore a few different hats. And I'm going to try not to be long-winded about it, because it's had quite the history. Well, it started, so way back when I was still living in Los Angeles, I was, let me think for a moment. So I had been doing sound, experimental sound. I had been like, so at Mass Art, I started, like, my beginnings really happened with video, because when I made my first video, then it was experimental in its form, and I played with the sound that I captured in the camera in the same way, without really understanding what I was doing. And that was the beginning of that. And I didn't really separate. I started taking a sound studio class, and I, felt something strongly for it. I started working in there a lot with a synthesizer.
Oh, wow.
So,
what kind of may I ask what kind of synthesizer?
Yeah, absolutely. An ARP 2600.
I was just going to say, I hope it's an ARP 2600. Because I love any 70 synthesizers.
Yeah, well, that's what Mass Art had. It was ARP 2600, ARP 2500. There was a Roland in there. I can't remember the model number.
Wow.
And then actually for a while we had one of Harvard's Surges, because Slide also taught the sound studio at Harvard as well. And then I actually became her assistant. I was doing so much because I had been studying sound physics kind of on my own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as total amateur. I was really.
I'm not again, amateur professional. We're getting deep into this is important, So you were what physics were you reading, or more importantly, what was the combination between the physics and your artistic practice? I mean, is that too much of is that connected?
No, that's actually that I can actually express very, very succinctly, because that was the beginnings with sound. Wow. I had actually transferred to Mass Art from University of Maine. Like, I basically went to high school in this little small town that has now become huge, because weirdly, it's only weirdly because of having grown up there. It's now I lived in the village next to Camden, where the Camden International Film Festival is now.
That's right, yeah.
And actually Ben Foley, who runs it, was in the class under me in high school. And we're talking really small school. Like, this was like, my graduating class was like 40 people. So, anyway, I started going because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I didn't have money to travel or anything, other graduates might do. But I also didn't want to just like stick around and work. So I started going to University of Maine, and I was actually taking linguistics and psychology. Yeah,
so this is exactly why I need you to have on my podcast. I can't say how thankful I am. Because this is the kind of thing I'm trying to get the world, not to get. I mean, again, I don't want to, not to wave a flag, but this is important. that you were studying linguistics and physics.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just getting excited about it.
That's great. I'm very happy. No, I was studying linguistics and psychology, and then that weirdly got me interested in sound physics, or not so weirdly, but I was just, I remember my psychology teacher had an interesting way that he opens the class. So my very first psychology class was psychology of personality.
Uh-huh.
And he opens the class by, when we came into the room, he had a tape deck blaring white noise. And everyone sat down, and then he started to give his lecture, and we're trying to hear him over this white noise. And he's kind of getting funny and looking at us, and then he's like, what's the problem? And then he turns it off, and he said, so I have tinnitus, and some days it gets this bad, and it affects every aspect of my personality. And then he said, it was like this amazing introduction that was like, you know, the sensorial introduction of like, I'm going to try to, you know, share this affect with you and, you know, try to get a sense of empathy. And I think that had like a really, it had a really strong effect on me. And I really started thinking about how environment affects us. And I started thinking a lot about sound. I wish I could remember that professor's name. I need to track that down.
Well, if you do, we'll send a link and have you.
I know. I should be giving him credit. I don't even know. I mean, he was an older gentleman. I don't know. You know, I don't know if he's even alive.
Well, that's pretty amazing that you step into a classroom and some dude teaching a psychology class, intro to psychology. He's teaching the big five. I don't know. Is that what he was teaching, like the personality theories and all that?
Yeah, we did the, oh gosh, it was so long. We did a whole bunch of those personality tests and talked about what might be true or false about them, what might be useful about them.
Right, less useful.
But actually, he was great because his big thing was really talking about about complexity and like how many different things, also how your personality is read by others.
Oh yeah, that's a big
change a lot based on their personality, and you know, that we're not in a bubble, basically. But I when I transferred to art school, when I finally got the courage to do that, there's always been this relationship of like the sciences and the creative fields for me. You know, my father's a scientist, and my I'm sorry, hold on, there was a crash.
Oh.
Is everything okay? Okay. It turns out my daughter actually is home from school today, and Valentina's being very, very kind and actually with her in the next room.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess we should say hi to Valentina.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on.
We should.
Valentina, you and Dad should come say hi.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no. She can totally be naked. It's just audio.
Huh.
I was telling him that you were a filmmaker, staying with us right now.
Yeah.
This is Mitch.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hello.
And then this is my daughter Odette. You want to say hi?
Hi, Odette.
You want to say that louder? Hi.
Hey.
So, what do you guys
Valentina, what film of yours should the audience see or should people look for?
Nothing yet.
Don't be humble. Do you have anything online?
Well, yes, I have this film online. I filmed myself with a Mexican artist.
Which
but
one?
I've been working on a new film for 3 years. So hopefully I'll be done this year.
Yeah.
Oh,
she's
fantastic.
actually, one of the things she's doing here is completing a 3-year-old, a 3-year in process film.
Yes. You know that. Really.
Oh, wow.
But maybe we can, you I think, did you send me the film or send me a link to the
The
one?
film I made?
Yeah.
It's on video public.
Okay.
Video.
Well, we can send Mitch a link.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you guys continue your reunion.
All right.
Thank you.
Next time you're in Boston area, you should meet up with Mitch. He's
Oh,
great.
I would love to. I've never been to Boston, actually.
Great.
Well, nice to meet you.
Well, I don't live in Boston anymore.
Are you in New York?
I'm not in New York. I'm in Weaverville, North Carolina.
Oh,
Whoa.
Isn't that crazy?
Okay.
So yeah, that changes a lot, doesn't it?
That's amazing, Mitch.
Yeah. I've been here 2 years. I mean, heaven knows I do wish I were in New York, but I'm not. But no, I'm here. I'm here.
I think I'd rather be in. Well, I'm so citied out. So what is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. What is it like there?
It's unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. It's both at once extremely challenging. It's one of the most difficult and challenging things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
It's also one of the most beautiful things I've done. So it's an interesting question. Yeah, that's a
That's wonderful, Mitch.
Yeah. But
I'm happy for you.
yeah. Enough about that now. Let's get back to this. Let's get back to your sound physics. Do you mind? I think we're going to take a break.
Okay.
I'm going to thank Anchor FM for making this all possible and for allowing people to download that site and create things, magical things. Everybody needs an anchor in life. You, me, just everybody. Anchor made this whole show possible. I'm immensely grateful to them. You too can use Anchor to make your own shows and create your own vision. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you. Well, I know, knowing who you are, that probably has a lot of meaning for you, right?
Probably.
Because you seem like someone who's thought about why is it red, why is it a button, is that the kind of what we were talking about earlier to pick up where do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, no, that's actually
That's your work, right?
especially with doing the PhD.
Right.
Let's just say it sort of puts a jetpack on obsessive thinking.
So I want to talk about, in the amount of time we have left, obviously continue about Come Kingdom Come. I guess as an example of your entire process using a single work. So we were leaving off with linguistics and so in physics. So pick up from there and
Gosh, it's incredible. Mitch, I have to say, I love that you're doing this because actually even talking about this kind of timeline in this way, I'm realizing how, like, the connection and the flow with all of this stuff and through my kind of overall, work that there's been this, like, path. So that's actually very cool.
Okay.
So Come Kingdom Come. So, okay. So with the sound physics, so I was very interested in how sound affected us psychologically and physiologically.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started working with analog synthesizers, I realized that they were kind of a way to build or dissect or change around a sound wave.
Mm-hmm.
And so with what I had been already studying, the different characteristics and properties of sound, I was able to play it basically with because it was it's kind of this dissection of a sound wave in a way, and then I was trying to do all kinds of experiments. So initially, my sound work on its own wasn't connected to my film work. I was trying to do these sound experiments, like I worked on creating a patch on the ARP 2600 to induce a panic attack.
Okay.
So I worked on I was playing around with how different frequencies would make you feel. So what frequencies would make you feel anxious? What frequencies would make you feel calmer? What frequencies would you know, at one point I was trying to make a frequency that would make you feel in love. And
that's a good one.
I started doing at that point, I started feeling comfortable enough where I started to do performances and play out. Like my first performance.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So my first performance was at Jacques Cabaret in Boston.
Oh, yes.
And it was kind of a like a noise lounge act where I was singing lounge like classics through my I had a Moog. Gosh, I can't remember the model numbers, but I had a Moog that I would plug a microphone in and would try to use my love patch on my voice.
Yeah.
I used to be so bold. So I was trying all of these like experiments that basically were connecting sound with motion.
Yeah.
And trying to understand what I was doing. And then at the same time, while I was doing my early, experimental films and videos, I started to apply some of this work to them, but then what really started to capture me was thinking about memory, because working with moving image it's kind of a cliche, but working with moving image had me thinking a lot about time and had me thinking a lot about memory.
Yeah.
And then with memory, I started to think about the connection with the senses, and that actually it's not a frequency. It's not like a sound frequency. It's not any individual characteristic or property to sound that makes us feel something. It's a whole soundscape. It's a whole experience that's multisensorial and also very subjective and individual. And what we can do is we can try to share that if we get it too correct, too exact, it's too individualistic, and we might not be able to share it as much with an audience because that experience is so subjective. So I try to create these kind of, what kind of sensorial memory might a child have? So, a good example is my first, for me, successful film was called Butterfly Weed, and it was. You remember that one?
Yes.
It was an attempt to recreate or provoke a feeling that I would have reoccurring when I was a child, and it's so strongly that I would remember it, but I didn't have words for it still, and I didn't understand what it was. I had words for the happies and the sads, but I didn't have word for this, which is interesting because since then, the closest that I found is the Portuguese saudade, but it's almost like a future saudade. It's almost like an expectation of a saudade, an expectation of a future missing, a future loss, a future nostalgia. And I feel like kids have this sense sometimes. They have their own sense of loss, and they have a more sophisticated understanding of time passing than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
And these things are fleeting still.
Yeah.
So with that project, what I found much more successful than anything that I could create in a laboratory in a studio was actually environmental sounds that I was capturing like on the road in, you know, unfamiliar but familiar places.
What were some of those sounds and places?
Sure. My family always moved around a lot growing up, and even after I, you know, went off to college, they continued. And so at this time, my mother was living in St. Louis. She was a visiting professor.
Good.
Or a professor in residency, a writer in residency there.
Mm-hmm. Was this a Shark Girls period? Or the tree?
This Dream Lives of Butterflies. Dream Lives of Butterflies period. Yeah. I think she was starting to write Shark Girls, but that happened in Maine. This was Dream Lives of Butterflies, the book before.
We're talking about Miley's mom, who's a fine writer. What was Dream? Yeah, they could do a whole show on that. So she was moving because of her residency, or because she was.
So she had a 1-year teaching and writing residency there at the University of St. Louis, and my father was working in the labs at DeKalb University in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, my mom ended up going and teaching in Columbia for a while in Chicago, but so I went to visit them, and I took a plane there. My brother was also in the University of Chicago. I took a plane there. Mm-hmm. I'd never been to Chicago.
Wow.
And then I drove to St. Louis, and then I drove back to Chicago, and I took a train back to Boston. So I was doing this kind of, section of the country. And when I was younger, I had lived in the Midwest for a while in Ohio.
Huh.
Yeah, and so there was this thing about the light when the sun was setting, that kind of like twilight period, dusk. That's very. I think it's very emotional for kids too. I think it's very emotional. I think there's something very old to that. This is like. If you're an animal in survival and you're, when night falls, if you're not a nocturnal predator, I think there's something to that emotion. There's a very strange emotion to the sun setting. And so the closest I got that, so I was trying to explore this sort of familiar, unfamiliar territory. And there's one section where... So my mother and I had gone out to try to find, there was these Native American burial mounds, and we got lost, as her and I have a tendency to do, and we're lost in these, this open prairie. And she's in front of me, but she's staying super cheerful because she's just she's happy to be walking in the prairie with her daughter. And I sort of let her go on ahead of me, and she started singing a song that she used to sing to me when she was little, or when I was little, that her mother had sung to her.
Oh, wow.
And so I filmed her while she was in this unfamiliar wide plain singing the song, and then she caught me and she was like, "Oh yeah, well now it's your turn," and she made me do the same thing while she filmed me. And then I superimposed the two together with us kind of singing together in these different planes but the same plane, in these different times but the same time, same song. So I think that came close. There was these attempts at trying to capture that feeling that might have some essence of the universal, but is definitely subjective.
Mm.
So then,
mm-hmm.
yeah. So, what kingdom come? Kingdom come. Should I like bridge into kingdom come?
well, yeah, because I think it's a great. I mean, because it was 10 years, right?
Kingdom Come did, yeah, even a bit longer. So,
and I think it's so important because I think it's emblematic of what we're discussing. Even you being with your mom, because I mean, I take it from the bank from here. I mean, this kind of stuff we're talking about now about Maile and her mom in this open field, and something coming out of that. That's what the arts are.
yeah.
They come out of things like that people might not think are important, or might seem kind of small or off the cuff.
Yeah.
That actually is the process, or might be. I just wanted to throw that out there, if that's all right. I just gotta.
Absolutely, Mitch, absolutely, and I think that's why there's this attempt to illustrate and to share and provoke those moments, because those are actually those moments are the moments that when you have loss, you remember, or when you're, that's like, and that does bridge into Kingdom Come, because so after Mass Art, I moved to California to study at CalArts for my master's and for my MFA, and the experience of going across the country to a place is kind of extreme, as I don't know, Southern California just always struck me as very extreme.
It is that.
It is. Everything's like, things shake and rumble and burn, and they're big and they're wide, and everything's just very epic there. And I was terrified at first.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then I kind of started to really love that and love that feeling, and especially love the desert. But
so what am I going to get? Not. I hope we don't get too far afield. I'm just thinking about the movie Zabriskie Point. No.
Oh yeah. No, that captured that really well. Yeah.
So go. So you started to love what initially had terrified you.
Yes, and but now that there was also the timing. So I, right before I moved
Uh-huh.
There was the turn of the millennium.
That's right.
I remember everyone was terrified. There was Y2K, which now just Y2K seems ridiculous. But I think one of the reasons everyone grasped onto that is because there was this very strong apocalyptic feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't really go away, did it? Certainly not in the States, because then you had 9/11 happen.
Right.
And
I should full disclosure. Again, this is something I'm being forced into because of the conversation. I like to be kind of cagey. I don't like to always reveal all my thoughts, beliefs, but
yeah,
I don't have a lot of sympathy. I'm pretty, for those out there who are curious, I am anti-dispensationalist.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? In other words, I have no sympathy for some of these. I don't have any. I think some of these ideas are quite bad ideas. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of inevitability and all that. I just thought. I hope I'm not. I'm just.
Yeah, but you acknowledge. You remember that feeling that I wasn't.
So which feeling do we mean? So we're talking about 9/11 and Y2K.
All of that and what happened afterwards. People started, and I'm not actually even referring to, or maybe I should be, but I'm actually talking about like a generalized people. Mm-hmm. There was a sense of instability and fear, and then people started to go into, there was something, especially in California.
I think a lot of it is just bad theology, or very bad flat-footed this is my language, flat-footed literalist cosmology. And there's nothing wrong with seeing a meaning to story or seeing, but the life does not work in a predetermined fashion like that. Right. I don't think. But, I think, go ahead. Yeah.
But would you say that people sometimes do?
Well, people may act in ways that evoke a feeling that is what's going on.
Exactly.
But but for me, there's a big distinction. In other words, that's something people are choosing to do.
Exactly.
Go ahead. I'm talking too much about this. But go.
No, you're not. But that's exactly it. Actually, you aren't, because Mitch, that's exactly what Kingdom Come early on was trying to explore. Mm-hmm. So I started reading into, while I was feeling around me this like bubbling up rage and fear, and people starting to become more religious, a lot of people becoming more fanatic, and then the war was happening, and people were starting to talk about more and more about the end of the world and end times and And I started looking into it and reading all of these accounts of a similar thing happening in the last turn of the millennium, or the millennium, and exactly what you're talking about, that it was almost like a fulfilling a self-prophecy, that people would almost work themselves into a collective frenzy, that some very bad things would happen. But then I was also, but then I'm in California, right? So then there's this other side of people trying to combat that feeling with hot yoga and extreme hiking and all of these others. So I was just what is the, all of this lives here, all of this feeling, all of these actions, this is this place is, I don't know how to feel it. And I would go out to the desert and to just reset and get a break, just feeling utterly overwhelmed and drained. And I think it first started when I was out in Joshua Tree, and I started, I bought myself a little recorder and I started making my first kind of field recordings. Basically, I was doing more and more sound design for film, first for my films, but then other filmmakers, like and professors at the school were asking me to do some work with them, other students.
That's great.
And when I graduated, I did, that film of Rebecca Barron's, which was so great. That like really, I'll be forever thankful to her in that film.
I love that. I love that film. That film stands up. That film stands up.
I think so too, and it really it created this really great niche for me of working with experimental filmmakers, often experimental documentary or essay documentary, and very often women. And it's like, because that's not my main line of work, I can be very selective, and and it all started with Rebecca, really. Yep. So I'm very thankful. So I was, because I was starting to do this more, and I think at that point I was already I'd worked on Rebecca's film. I think I was starting to work on Adele Horn's The Tailenders at that point. And I was going out, I was doing more and more recording and starting to build my own sound archive to work with. And I had this very important experience when I was out at Barker Dam in Joshua Tree when there was still water there. And I don't think there's water. Well, the weather's been so crazy. Maybe there's water again. There was a period it dried up. There was still water, and there was these. There was a lot of tourists, and because it's all these big rocks, voices were kind of echoing and bouncing around, and bouncing off the water and the rocks, and I was just sitting. I was sitting, and I had this little spot I liked to go to that kind of jetted out a little bit into the water, and I was just sitting there while the sun was setting, recording for a very long time, and hearing these voices kind of turn into these ghostly little echoes, and then slowly as the sun was setting, they're disappearing. Like there's less and less and less of them. And as they're disappearing, these grebes that I couldn't hear before start calling and making their little peep, peep. That starts bouncing around the rocks as well, almost like a crossfade between the human worlds and the grebe worlds, sonically. And it felt bigger than what it was. It felt like, I remember I started crying. Like, it just took on this massive, like, symbolic weight for me. And that recording became the first recording that was part of the project. That originally was going to be, I started talking with an artist that I had collaborated with on a kind of interdisciplinary performance, a Canadian artist, Carmen Zella. We originally were starting to think of it as like a kind of interdisciplinary theatrical thing that was it was really ambitious. It was going to have like a chorus of hot yoga participants and like all of, we wanted to kind of illustrate that frenzy and fear and rapture. And I wanted to mix in a kind of messy theology to it, actually.
Oh yeah, you have to if you're doing a project on that, sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I started. My brother at this time moved to LA, and he's a poet and a writer, and he also knows Latin. So he was actually I asked him to write some lyrics for it. Because at this point I thought, okay, what could hold this much emotion, and then I was just like, opera, definitely. I mean, it's just amazing to be young, right? I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do an opera. Why not?
Yeah.
So my brother, I asked him to work on lyrics with me, and they were less of lyrics, they were poetic. Like I was using, when I say opera, it was definitely not traditional by any means, but it had the sections and it had the narrative and this climactic point. And originally it was conceived to have this whole theatrical experience as well. Mm-hmm. But
that's an opera.
That's opera.
That's an opera. I mean, look, people are, of course, as you know, a theme on my podcast is, how people label things and the consequences of that. And I know, so yes, you created an opera.
That's really interesting theme, Mitch. That's a really interesting theme. Well, I was, it's really funny because the term, I have definitely gotten into trouble for calling it that. And I even got critiques. There's a lot of people in the experimental sound world were like not interested in opera, but I loved the emotion that opera held and affected, and that's
what opera is about.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if that is a artistic form is about anything, that's its grand project. Which I think if somebody loves that and understands that, they understand opera.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other, again, go ahead. That's just something
But you definitely have people doing it like, you have people like, do you know Juliana Snapper?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. She's doing it. She's doing it underwater. She's doing it she is really experimenting, but also has this incredible, training and traditional background in it that she has as a foundation. I mean, she just amazes me. Mm-hmm. But I was going to try. And actually we worked with, an opera singer, Gabriella Crow, and she was amazing. And my brother basically, he said, I really think we should turn these lyrics. I think you should be in Latin. And I think it should be like a priest. Yes, really.
Yeah.
So he translated them to Latin, and then we had this funny, moment in the studio for the recording where Gabriella was like, I don't know how to pronounce this. Mm-hmm. And my brother was like, well, no one really knows how to pronounce Latin, so I say it's fair game. And but she was Latina, so he was like, "That's a Latina," and she was like, "Great." So then, which was gorgeous.
That seems very logical to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. And then I had her next surprise was I didn't have a traditional noted score. I had a graphical score.
Okay.
And
I'd love to look at that sometime.
I'll definitely send. Yeah,
I'd love to look at that graphic scores. There should be more of that. I think.
I think so too.
Have you seen John Coltrane's score for Love Supreme?
Yes, I have. It's beautiful. Yes.
That's kind of a graphic score now.
Yes.
I mean, there's words and there's text and there's some notes and.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had a lot of notes as well for her. And then I did a lot of acrobatics as silently as possible in the studio to sort of help guide her. But she killed it. It was amazing. She did an amazing job. And she was also, what I really appreciated is she was so open because I ended up really cutting up and experimenting with her recording as well. And she was just very, very open. Well, that's what ended up happening while while this ambitious theatrical idea was, constantly getting stalled, I moved into a different place. Strangely, I started to feel, I think probably also personally, I was starting to have social anxiety.
Oh.
And I found myself needing a lot more alone time, going out to the desert more, and I was needing a lot. I loved collaborating, but I found myself, or maybe I just did too many collaborations. I started getting I had never done an album, and I started getting very attracted to the intimacy and personal moment of an album. And I had already been working so much on the sound, so I kind of told Carmen, like, okay, we can still do the theatrical part, but someday, but can I just go with the sound and do an album
of just sound?
Yeah.
Wow.
And see what happens, and maybe it'll be quieter, maybe it'll be more personal, and it did end up being, I did collaborate with a few people, but in more of an exchange. Like, I collaborated with a French musician, Telemake, and I collaborated with a really wonderful British singer, Jessica, not Jessica Catron, oh shoot. Wait, let me see if I have the album with me.
I hope you do. It's your album. I hope you have at least you have a copy of it.
Did I not send you the album, Mitch?
I do not have it, I don't believe.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I only have one more physical copy, but he's actually sending me a bunch more.
Okay.
So I will send you, but meanwhile, I'm going to make a note. I will send you the digital copy.
Okay.
Let me just make this note. Send Mitch album. Yeah, I'll send to you and your producer, because I'm sorry that I don't know why I thought that you had.
Well, there's been a lot of time, traveling and moving and things. At least
Yeah.
That's an extraordinary part of them.
It has been messy.
Yeah.
Well, so this was with Jessica Constable. Constable. She's wonderful. And this it started also at this time taking on a much stronger ecological narrative.
Okay.
And also even contrasting this fear of humans having their worlds end, and meanwhile so many species going actually extinct because of our activities, and I started getting really interested in archives of disasters, like recorded disasters.
Yep.
Like earthquakes and tsunamis and also
artists have to deal with this stuff.
Yes,
because it's going on in the world. I'm not saying every artist does. I'm not saying it's like a commandment from on high, but this is the material of our lives now, and this is what everybody's dealing with. So it's going to be, you got to deal with it.
I feel very strongly about that as well, Mitch, and that's like exactly what my thesis. I actually can send you an essay I wrote called "An Artist in an Archive" that is like doing exactly that, calling for artists to get into archives to work with the past to give us a future warning we can feel. And I feel very, very strongly about that, and make people care.
Yeah.
Try to get people to care, and to feel it, and feel its presence. It's present, like feel the urgency, and not the urgency that has some old narrative to it, like Y2K or like. or, you know, I mean, apologies to my Christian friends, but, you know, the narrative of you know, an apocalypse where you get to be raptured, you know, like.
Well, as you know, I made it abundantly clear in my earlier comments. I hope I was explicit enough that I reject. That's not even. I don't believe that's even real Christianity. But that's another. Yeah, it's a whole. I reject it. Yeah. I mean, that's
and that's exactly, and that is so. That's what this album was trying to explore in a more intimate, at times quieter. I guess it was like the thing that happened similar to the moment in the studio where I was on the ARP trying to find a patch to induce anxiety, compared to the moment when I realized that, you know, the simple sound of crickets with twilight light shot from the back of a car as if you're a child falling asleep can actually feel so much more. It can make you feel so much more, and with more complexity. And that was, you know, that's what all of my work has been trying to do, is to explore and accept complexity. Which is what your podcast is doing too, right?
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah,
it's really great. Something.
Yeah. So Come Kingdom Come, I then got asked to, after the album came out, I got asked to perform it on Activating the Medium in San Francisco, which was a festival I really highly, I really, really had a lot of respect for the people running it, Jim Haynes and Andrea Williams and 23-5. So I was very honored, and then I was like, how am I going to perform this? And after all of that, how can I perform this? And then around that time when I was trying to figure that out, I think it was on Facebook. Olivia Block posted a picture, also wonderful sound musician, incredible sound musician, one of my favorites, sound artists. Okay. She's, highly recommend her work. She's just a great artist all around, actually, but mostly works in the sounds. But she had been exploring, a type of a photographic technique where you just expose the contact paper. I don't know enough about it, but you just expose to the elements as things can form. And they were incredibly beautiful and ghostly and had these sort of hints. And then because she had been taking like photos of the photos process, I was like, oh, you should try to animate these. And she was kind of like, oh, you should try to animate these. And I did, and I loved it. Oh, wow. Because it just really slowly, you can't really tell how it's like the opposite of dissolving. And
explain a little bit more about that for those. That's so interesting.
It's coming. I mean, I guess it is kind of the opposite of dissolve. It's like coming out of these figures and images or objects, you can't figure out what they are just, they're coming out with the exposure so slowly, and at the level of grain. You know, it's the grain of the photographic medium, so they're just kind of accumulating at a level you can't see or really perceive. So you're witnessing a change, but you can't really perceive it. So it's like that like climate change, right? Like a hyperobject. You're witnessing a change, but you can't really perceive it.
You're calling that a hyperobject?
Huh?
You're calling that a hyperobject. That's your term.
Yeah, in the sense that it's something that is happening at a level that you can't really perceive at the same time you're having this.
So you're talking about the inability to grasp something that's real.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of because it's what would you say? I mean, because it's so
either it's
vast,
too micro, or it's too macro, or
yeah.
it's too, or it's not a temporal. It's not in a time that you are used to perceiving, or we don't really understand that much about how we perceive time. So who knows? So. But it's happening in front of you nonetheless, right? So it seemed like the perfect symbol for the show. So I created a triptych video in part with these images, mostly with these images. And then I did have in one of the sections, I had done this work with a dancer. And this artist, Gilbert, he had created this. He was here visiting. We were working on, actually, we were doing live visuals for Wadada Leo Smith. We were doing that for a few years together, and we were using his program. Oh my gosh, I forgot the name. Spectral GL.
Oh, okay.
We're using his program Spectral GL, that basically it's like a visualizing instrument. It takes in the sound waves and uses their properties and characteristics to make a visual or affect a visual. Mm-hmm. So we worked with this dancer in a studio. Basically, I tried to set up this complex system where everything, almost like a little artistic ecology. Everything was affecting everything. So she was listening to the albums, the music, and moving to that. At the same time, her image was being taken in by video, being affected with Spectral GL. The sound was affecting Spectral GL as well, and therefore visually moving her image with sound waves as well. And she was seeing that projection, so also kind of dancing with herself. So there was this like complex little circuit, and that ended up being one of the videos in the triptych. Mm-hmm. So I performed it like this a few times in a few different festivals, And then I was a visiting artist in the film department at SUNY Binghamton. Mm-hmm. They were bringing me to perform it there as well, when all of a sudden I decided to do it blindfolded, visually blindfolded.
Okay.
And this was... well, I guess I'm always wanting to change things. So like I had already been performing it a few times, and I felt like, okay, I need to do something different if I'm going to perform it again. So I did. I had a kind of cream colored, almost blended in with my face, sleep mask from the airplane.
Yeah.
And I put that on. I cheated, granted. I could see just the thin line underneath. But what ended up happening was, because at the beginning of the performance, what I do is I do a live feed of the sound of the electromagnetic field in the room with my VLF receiver, the very low frequency receiver.
Yeah.
And I kind of use that, sort of pretending it's some sort of Geiger, like an instrument to, like I sort of, because when it gets closer to people, of course, the sound changes. So I like to try to make people, put them in a little bit of a nervous state. And it was very hard to move with the blindfold on, and it affected, of course, my movements. I was more stiff, more careful, slower. And then when I sat down to perform, something about the blindfold, maybe because of the little slit, or anyway, it became an endurance thing. I couldn't move.
Oh, wow.
Only my hands for playing the computer. So, and this ended up having a huge effect visually on the audience and emotionally, therefore. So it wasn't so much that I was blind as I looked blind to them.
Oh, I see.
And it had this effect on them. So then I started performing it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I did that was last year at a symposium in Denmark, Sounding Bodies.
Oh, wow.
And there I got to perform in front of one of my biggest heroes, Hildegard Westerkamp.
Oh.
Who actually took the time afterwards to have dinner with me and for like 2 hours critique the performance, which was terrifying and amazing.
Is there anything you want to say more about that, or is that we have?
Yeah, she basically what she felt was that she understood why there was so much going on, but because there was so much going on and there wasn't really a moment for pause and process, after a while she got overwhelmed and a part of her kind of shut off to it a bit. So that was hard to hear, but I'm so thankful that I heard that because I thought about it, of course. And what ended up happening was I decided that phase of this project was over. So only just last year, or I think I only finished it even this January, for the first time in many years, I made a single-channel film, experimental film. That is like a part 2 in what I'm calling the Extinction Trilogy. And it's called Exponere, which is Latin for exposure. And what I did was I realized that while I love experimental and non-linear, but I as I get older, or I don't know, I'm finding myself returning to narrative. I'm wanting a narrative that plays with time and plays with dimension. And so I created this little narrative that because you have to hear the character, I had to redo the sound design. I had to make it sound design, right? It was no longer a performance. It was no longer an album. Those things happen. And it changed a lot. The sound changed, the images changed. There was like elements. Basically, what happens to me a lot, I believe very strongly in archives, but I believe in them being active and activated. And so, and I'm not precious with my work in the sense, when elements go into a piece, for me, it's a very important practice to my own practice to let those pieces come apart again, and maybe some of them find their way into new work. So I basically break all of my pieces up into an archive eventually. And so this one, a lot of the pieces remained, but it became a new work, a part 2. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm doing with a piece of music of my own right now.
That's great.
Isn't that interesting that that's actually how I compose? Even though it's weird though. It's weird because I never thought of it that way. I mean, I never really would thinking in that the way the language you're using now. Isn't that interesting?
That's really interesting. We are overdue to collaborate, you know.
I would love to. The word I came up with is modular. I didn't have a better word.
Module, yes.
Modularity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That fits absolutely what I'm talking about as well.
Huh. This has been really an exciting conversation.
It has been.
I like the fact we use one work because you could trace the work over time.
Yeah.
And see, what that does to the work and what that means. And
I'm very, very grateful to have an opportunity to talk about that because I haven't before, and that's it's given me a lot to think about, and it helped me see that line as well. So I'm thankful to you for that, Mitch.
Yeah, I do what I can. Is there anything else you want to say? As you know, I hate saying goodbye. It's really hard for me, but everything must end,
I know. I feel the same way. But so I guess what I do want to say is that I hope we talk again very soon.
Okay.
And we should definitely collaborate at some point.
Yeah, we should, but we have to iron out, of course, the technical details and such as they are about what form that would take.
I have found the kind of working from, because I still, with a lot of my sound design for films and filmmakers, there's still a lot of them for filmmakers in the States.
Okay.
So I'm doing a lot of working, satellite work. And I've actually grown to kind of love the exquisite quartz process that you kind of have to do. You can't do things so much live, but you can do these kind of sharing pieces back and forth, and they evolve a little bit here, you bounce it back a little bit there. And it's not always exactly like that. Things change, but I've grown to kind of love that.
Well, we're going to do it. It's going to happen.
Excellent.
But we don't know. Of course, we don't want to say too much ahead. You don't want to, but we'll figure something out. It's got to use my piano. That's important to me. That's the only stipulation for me. But you can do anything you want to do with that. So
I would truly hope that would be the case.
Yeah.
And actually, I've had this the album, The Future Memory for Odette. That was, I still have that sitting in draft form with the score.
Wow.
I think you sent me a MIDI.
I did.
No.
I may have.
Maybe. There's because now I'm seeing like a file in there. And then there was a French label that was talking about releasing it, but it just wasn't followed up on. So, but maybe we can even use that score as the beginning.
We could, or I could redo it and make it better. You know me, I'm always wanna. So, but in any event, I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's really inspired me. And I hope that people out there in the world learn some things about not only what you're doing, but also all this stuff that we're talking about. So great thanks to you for being on the show.
And thank you, Mitch. It was great talking to you.
Absolutely. Say hi to Odette and everybody there.
I will, absolutely.
Thank you.
And talk to you soon.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.